you're not going to light up one of those cigars, right? So
No,
no, that's an outside thing.
that's right.
So okay, good. So welcome to the pub for everyone. This is King Charles. He's a friend of ours from down east. It's his first time in the pub. I've been in his backyard drinking his whiskey
That's right.
before.
That's right.
So who is Charles?
Good question. I say King Charles just to, and I'll give myself a bit of importance because all these years I'd introduce myself as Charles, like the prince. But hey, I got an upgrade a year ago, so I'll go with that. In fact, an interesting story. I got to meet Prince Charles in
Oh wow.
1983. Yeah, my claim to fame. You know, we're all told we got a 15-minute claim to fame. Well, mine was in June, actually, at this time, early June, late May 1983. Prince Charles came over. And here I'm in Ottawa, grew up here, and I was part of the Governor General Foot Guards. So I was one of the
Oh,
ceremonial guards when he came up, and it was the first time Lady Di came over. So
okay.
all of us were on the parade. We're all involved, all the whole battalion. And, we dressed, rehearsed the drills. We're very good at the whole ceremonial thing. And we were told that morning in no uncertain words that if the prince were to come and talk to you, because he does his inspection, right? And he goes to different soldiers, you're going to address him as yes, your highness, or no, your highness. They're all yes, no questions, right? Yeah, okay.
Hmm.
Well, there's like hundreds of us. Anyways, here he comes, and the band, start playing, and I see from the corner of my eye, because we're looking straight, I see him walking and then beelining in my direction. And I thought, oh no, 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 please not me. And sure enough, there he is in front of me. I'm thinking, this is surreal. And two thoughts came to my mind. I realized that, oh, his ears are not that big, because that was the big thing at the time. And then I was afraid I would not understand his British accent, right? But again, that was not too bad at all. So he asked me a bunch of questions like, are you finding it hot, soldier? Of course, I said, no, it was boiling hot. He said, are you enjoying the militia in the summer? I said, yes, Your Highness, right? And a few other ones had to do with the weather. Again, yes or no questions. But lo and behold, that my face with his made it in the paper the next day, front page. Prince Charles does his, inspection, and my face was right there. So that's my 15-minute claim to fame. So that was awesome. That was awesome.
There that's awesome. That's awesome. So I poured myself a Lafroig quarter cask because I figured I'd save the Lagavulin 16 for when you actually come.
Nice.
Uh what are you gonna have a drink today?
Yes, I will. And I went way at the back. I almost got a Lefroy, almost, but I went way in the back. Something I hadn't tried, I hadn't had in a while, and it's a Johnny Walker green label.
Ooh,
Right? Yeah, very nice. And a
it
lot of people don't
is.
realize the Johnny Walkers are blends, right? So for this one, it's a blend of the Talisker, Dragonmore, Cowl Ila, which is very on its own, is actually very good. And the fourth one, I never had this one on its own, Linkwood. So all
Oh,
those make up the
I
Johnny Walker
I
Green.
have
Now,
one over there. I do have one over there on my shelf.
oh, there you go.
'Cause,
Now,
Uh
full disclosure, I made a mistake because I don't have a dram measuring stick, so it's my bad. But there's more than a dram in there, so I don't know what I have to do.
yes, that's one thing that I never get that little in a glass, but we keep trying, right?
Keep making the same mistake, but yes, we keep trying. So I hope this should satisfy the requirements of this podcast.
There you go. So you and I met through Bishop Scott McCaig. We were on our motorcycle ride, and you had invited us all over for dinner and a whiskey and cigars.
That's right.
You you have always had a hospitable heart, is what I call it. You and your lovely bride.
Yeah,
So
Christine.
is that
She
something that you guys took on as a charism, or is that something more recent? Or
That's a good question, actually, because at the heart, my wife Christine, she's very generous, and me, by nature, it's not like a gift, it's not a spiritual gift, but I've learned from my mother as a kid to be hospitable, right? So it's like you garner the skills, right? But in marriage, as a couple, that became our our identity, one of our identities, if we can say, where together I grew even more in that hospitality through our marriage with Christine. I like just exude from her. She just exuded so much of that that I, got picked up in that and brought that to another level for me. And as a couple, it's something that we've done. And like you said, Bishop Scott and other priests that we know, Father Sean and
yep,
and others. So we've become quite, we practice hospitality to many people. And Bishop Scott or Father Scott at the time was one of them. And when you guys came over, I think Father Sean knew Tom also at the time. Not
yes,
not
yes, he
necessarily
did.
you, but Tom, which is also part of the
The
motorcycle
ride,
rock squad group.
yeah, yeah. Father Sean had spent time down, I think, in Minnesota or somewhere like
Yeah.
as a priest. So well,
Hmm.
and then I called you and let you know that uh, a good friend of my son, the priest, was going up there to study, and you guys took care of Father Joe for the last 2 years, and from Idaho. So
Other Joe from Idaho, but before that, when you were here, all of you, and we had the cigars and drinks and we had a good time, and you said to me, I mean, the way you thanked me and you looked me in the eye and you said, if you're ever out west, you got a place to stay or drop by. Like, and I knew like you meant it. And that was enough for me to say, I'm going to stay connected with Sean Lynn, get to know him a little bit more. So that what made the connection stay. We only met that one time,
yep,
and a bit like Tom and Richard and a few other ones. And because leading up to Father Joe, that just didn't happen happenstance, right? It was
no.
because we had a connection, you and I, and we had
Well,
chatted
you
a
did
few
you
times.
you did come out west, and I was at my daughter's place, and you guys came over for supper and
That's right.
whiskey
That's right.
and
And that's exactly why that further connection where Father Sean met you and
yeah.
it grew from there. Then you made a connection to say, hey, this Father Joe, Joseph is your grandson's godfather, right?
Yeah, yeah. Father Joe is my grandson's godfather.
That's
Yes.
right. And the funny thing was, so you told us about Father Joe, and you also know the sons of our mutual good friend Adele and Adrian at the time. So Ethan and some of his friends and Caitlin, who now his wife, had told us about this Father Lustig that they met because they were attending that morning mass where they lived near that church. And they said, "Oh, you gotta, there's morning mass. You gotta, come and meet Father Lustig." And I said, "Oh, yeah. Well, there's a Father Joe. We also want to meet, or we met him." And not realizing we're all talking about the same father, same priest. They're saying Father Lustig. I'm saying Father Joe. None of us knew. They didn't know his first name. We didn't know his last name. So
Yeah.
the day I showed up at morning mass and it was him, that was kind of funny. So it's a small Catholic world, right? So yeah, he was there for 2 years. He ended up staying with Father Sean Wanger's place. Again, that connection made it that he connected there because we had him over with Father Sean. So
Well, and what's interesting is that's the whole idea behind building brotherhood with heroic men, and just letting men know that they need brothers that they can connect with, and then it it grows, right? Because it's oh, I'm your friend now your friend is my friend, and kind of thing. And so inquiry minds want to know, like you said, your mom helped teach you hospitality, so you're French Canadian descent, right?
that's right. That's right.
that,
And
that did that include guys from Alberta, that hospitality?
you mean if their influence?
No, would mom approve of you having friends with
Oh,
friends from Alberta?
oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, both my parents have passed on, and my mother's only been 8 years now. I think it was 8 years in April. And oh yeah, well, my dad, when actually before I go on, I made another mistake about the gin, so you can indulge me for 10 seconds, and I
Oh
think you'll
yes.
appreciate that. Is I never did the 3 drops, based on
Oh yeah.
the Holy Trinity, right? That brings life. One, two, three. Right.
There
That's
you go.
I need the Holy Spirit to bring the whole thing alive.
Well,
So
and yes, it opens it up, and
yes,
it's
we'll get more on that later. But my father, when I was in high school, and it's funny because we moved to a small town, Rockland, for my high school because all of my siblings had moved on, and my dad was teaching there. It's like 40 minutes from here. So I ended up going to the school my dad was teaching.
so
And
it
what's kind
is
of
that on the Quebec side or is that on the Ontario side?
That's still on the Ontario side, right on the river.
Okay.
And you cross the river, and 10 minutes away, you're in Thurso, Quebec, where Guy Lafleur was born.
Mm,
And so a bit of a segue. Yeah, so Guy Lafleur, Montreal Canadiens, I grew up as a Habs fan. And
yes, I saw that was my first live hockey game, seeing those guys play down in LA in 1979
oh my gosh, in LA.
or
Wow.
78. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I saw them at the Forum, the old Forum, a few times. And then Guy Lafleur was friends with the mayor in Rockland, where I was staying in high school. So one time he came over to the elementary school, Saint Trinité Holy Trinity. And we were in high school. We had already finished a year. So I went into the school and saw Guy Lafleur from, a distance. We were not with the kids, but I thought, man, he's tall, right? That was quite a little fun moment there. Anyways, so I was in high school. My dad was a teacher and a school counselor, and he was very good at that because he was all about the heart, and students loved him for that. And I was in his class, in his geography class, for one day, and first day, I ended up in the front of the class, sitting down, and some goofballs were sitting beside me, some of my friends, and they, before the class starts, he throws my books on the floor, whatever. So I'm bent down, picking up all my stuff, and my dad walks in, and he's kind of military style, right? And this is back in the '70s where, teaching was a bit different than it is today. He says, calls me by last name as if I was in the military because he'd been in the military. It's always like,
Okay.
in the military, we do this. Calls me Labrosse, or in French, Labrosse, sit up straight. And the principal, we were friends with him. I guess, I don't know. Luckily, and it was right. The next day, he put me in another geography class with another teacher. Yeah, thank God for that. So, born in Ottawa and raised, except for those 10 years I was in Rockland. I'm back in Ottawa. So, yeah, French Canadian, French Franco Ontarien from Ontario. So yeah, all my life here and all my life believing, right? I've always had a belief in God and Jesus. I never doubted that, but I did not have an infused faith like we have today in the Holy Spirit. That was all. It was all cultural. I think you could say it was all. But again, I had no doubts. Like my friends, I would still go to mass on Sunday. Like my parents didn't have to tell me. My parents were gone to the cottage. I was at home alone. I was always a very good boy. I, you could trust me. I just didn't do any crazy things. And now, just to show you the other side, for example, so there was 11 o'clock mass, and I was about 3 minutes away from the church. But Sunday mornings, I liked listening to the TV, black and white TV, the Star Trek, right? The original series. And I'd watch that from 10 to 10:57. As soon as the credits, I turn off the TV and run to mass, arrive there on time, but sweating like so that was where my mindset was at. But it's only later on that everything turned around for the better, or with an infused Holy Spirit life, as we can say.
Well, and that's where a lot of people, you and I, are probably similar in the age category. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand what it was like growing up in our era or in our parents' era. And they judge everything on today's standards, which we didn't have those standards back then. Like you say, black and white TV. Guy Lafleur, the hockey star, smoked like a chimney and didn't wear helmets and had his hair flowing as he was going down the wing. And yeah, so, and like my grandparents, they were picking up cow patties to heat the house
Wow.
on the prairie. Like, and it's hard for people to put in context. Like, you're probably like me, where the cell phone wasn't really in use till we were full on adults. And well, I remember my wife, right after we were married, bought me the my first computer, which was a Coco Tandy Coco 2 or something. Like, it was 64 kilobytes of it. And it's hard for people to even fathom. And that was like the first basically home computer, right? So,
Old candies, my gosh, I'd forgotten about those.
and ColecoVision, the advent of the video game. Well, we,
Yeah.
as a kid, I ponged. I don't know if you ever
Yep.
remember Pong
Yes, I did on the TV.
on the TV. And then our TV, even though nobody was playing or it wasn't hooked up anymore, every once in a while you get a ball going across the screen like it was still. So,
Our first computer was an Atari, like not an Atari gaming console, but an Atari.
oh,
The model was 130 XE, and the 130 stood for like 128 kilobytes, so like double what you would have had.
ooh,
And it came like I was in college at the time,
oh,
and
wow.
having grown up, gone to high school in Rockland at the time, there was only like 350 students, right? So we didn't have. It was just on the cusp of computers, but in that small school, we didn't like. I took typing, right? 2 semesters of typing 01 and typing 02, which to this day, I'm so glad my dad made me take that. Right, that was one of the few optional courses, but because today everything on the keyboard, man,
Yeah.
it's such a breeze, such a breeze. But I get to college, and pretty much everybody else is already involved in computers. I did, but we had a teacher that had an extra class and an official class, and we spent time with him. And I got this Atari, and it had a word processor in it. And when it came time to to print. I had a little printer, and it was
Okay.
not even a dot matrix. It was like little letters hitting like a black sponge. And when you printed, it was so slow that you timed it with like going for supper, right? You start off, go for supper, and when you're back, it just finished, right? For 2-3 pages. Yeah.
And now here we are having a dram, full color, 4K. Well, actually, I think I got it set for 1080 recording. Like this is it's amazing where our world's gone. But in the faith, like I was raised where I think there was a lot of confusion with Vatican II, where the parents didn't really know what to teach the kids, and the school, Catholic school, I don't remember getting any kind of real Catholic teaching or formation growing up. So it was just kind of a lost generation, or Bishop Barron talks about just the pablum, or is what I call it. Just there's no expectations of learning, where they don't have any problem pushing a kid for advanced calculus in high school, but they don't want them to learn about too much about God and the church's teaching kind of thing. So
Yeah, and something that's interesting where it was like I mentioned earlier, it was very cultural, and it was kind of hit or miss. If the faith took, I mean, there's cultural and to God's grace, I had more faith than maybe the average guy, but in French Canada, or at least French Ontario, there, unlike like in English, maybe I don't know if it was in Alberta, but in English Ontario, you had the public school, but you also had the Catholic school
yeah,
growing up.
yeah, it
And
is in Alberta too.
yeah, in Ontario on the French side at that time, the like high school, the the powers that be said, like, well, no, we're all, like, not paraphrasing, but like we're all culturally Catholic. We don't need Catholic specific schools. Our schools are with Catholic kids and teachers, right? Like they were not wrong, but they were not right as well. Like you know what I mean? Like it was still kind of a public forum. Right? It may be fine at the time, but so, well, I remember again in our high school, it's, it was not per se a Catholic school, but it was made a Catholic. Actually, with my dad, every morning we'd be in our, was it home class? We call it.
Yeah,
And he
yeah,
get
homeroom.
on the speaker for the whole class. There'd be some announcements, and we all stood up for the Our Father in French, right? And so that was in 1976 to 81, right? And that was normal, right? But the I think the English sector definitely made that distinction where no, we're gonna have some Catholic schools, and so that was different, and it made sense, right?
So
So that was a,
what happened to the faith, especially in Quebec, where like it was the powerhouse for the Catholic Church for centuries here, uh, and then probably what, mid 70s, early 70s. Like I'm not sure when the light switch got turned off there.
the Quiet Revolution. So some of that started in the late 50s and into the 60s, and saw the full effect, or more the full effect, in the 70s. To your point, so part of the problem, and we could talk for hours on this because it's very, even for us living in Ontario as francophone, it's different than living as francophone Quebec. In Quebec, the church and the church man, priest, monsignor, even in politics, it was very tight, too tight, and too much power. Right. Where there's power, there's corruption. Right. Power corrupts. And there was a lot of control. There was a lot of this shalt, thou shalt do this and all that. And it was a rebellion, unfortunately. Right. And,
Well, and the
and
politics seem to replace the faith.
but
Is
today, yes. But at the time, we're under Premier Duplessis. He was very close with the church and vice versa, and they saw both, and they saw the same thing, the populace,
oh,
right? So, and there was a rebellion about the whole thing, and so they had their own issues here in the French church. It was a bit more subdued, right? There was some of that, but we're still under the francophone community of clergy and priests and religious and sisters. It was not as, shall we say, can I say, bad as what it was in Quebec, but there was still some of that. But even in Ottawa, right? It's a
yeah.
bilingual city. The cathedral was for the longest time French first, like the diocese. It has 145 churches, I believe. The
Oh, wow.
majority of churches were French. The cathedral was French primarily. And if you go
Notre Dame. Yeah.
if you go into the cathedral, you see all the statues of the saints, and
Yeah.
the names are all French at the bottom, right?
Oh, are they? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. And so just a little, note of the history over
And
there.
if you are ever in Ottawa, it's a must see the cathedral there.
It is. It is
It's
beautiful.
beautiful, and yeah.
It is beautiful. Definitely.
Yeah. So, Charles, what do you do for fun?
Well, you're looking at one of
Uh,
them. I forgot how the green label is really good.
Yeah, I
I
haven't
like.
had it for a bit. I might have to pull that out for my next episode just to remind me.
Well,
So,
there you go. I enjoy time with the fellows, right? And we're talking mainly. Um, Most of my contacts have faith, like in the men
mhm.
and young men, some not so old, and I find myself so yeah, enjoying this, as you know, enjoying a nice cigar every so often. And for some reason, obviously God has Christine and I in relationships a lot with either priests, religious sisters, couples, married couples, engaged couples, young couples, single men, single women. Christine has she has 25 women that she helps spiritually lead.
Wow.
Right? Meets once a month, and
And she was
she wrote a,
featured, she was in that recent movie, Permission, with
yes,
on Father Bob Bedard, which you would
that's
have
right,
grown up knowing him too, or
that's right.
he was an Ottawa-based priest, right? So,
Yeah, he was from Ottawa, and we had him at St. Mary's as our pastor. And another claim to fame is, or maybe I don't know how big it is, but I take a bit of honor in 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 thinking that. So back about 10 years ago, when the company decided to write that's like a book, right, about Father Bob. And Christine was
mhm.
working for the companions at the time in the office, and with her editing background, it was a shoe in for her to work at that. Right, so she worked with several priests, Father Dennis Hayes in particular, with the archives and all that. And it came to a point where it was time to, okay, what shall we call this book? And I always remember we're one morning on our morning walk, and we're saying, what should it be? And we turned literally a corner and had this inspiration. I said, it's going to be called Give God Permission. Because
Wow.
that's who he is. And Christine brought it to the committee, and sure enough, they took that, right? Because that was his message. That's who he was. So that's my little claim to fame, Mary Father Bob. I was not in the movie per se, but actually I was recorded, but there was so much material that I had to pick.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well,
so
you're not going to end up on the cutting room floor in this episode, okay? So,
okay, good to know. There's only so much rejection I can take.
so
And
I know you do like your culinary. So what's your go-to dish that keeps people happy?
oh, I see that we make. Well,
Yeah.
it there's many, but definitely with Christine's Italian background, there's a lot of Italian meals, right? Spaghetti meatballs with her grandmother's meatball recipe. Oh my god!
Oh,
Oh yeah, no, that's
does she share?
oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I expect
Some
an
people,
email.
some people in her family, one person in her family saying, "Hold back on the ingredient," But no, it's made to share. It's like it's
Yeah.
plus the meat is cooked in balls, cooked raw in the sauce, right?
Mm.
So it sits there for a couple of hours, just soaks in all the sauce, right? So that's what
Mm.
makes it a sausage lasagna, right? I, I got to know I got to know pasta with oh my gosh, the green sauce, the
Pesto or
pesto. I discovered pesto when her dad made that. First time I met him, he had pesto something. Oh, I love pesto. So anything pesto. Chicken, hamburgers, steaks, so all kinds of variations, right? So that's part of her menu, hospitality. Going back to what keeps me happy or doing stuff is yes, I do meet a few guys, a few young men together. I meet on a regular basis. I meet another middle-aged man, he's coming back to his faith and he's struggling a bit where he is. And another in the family, there's a young nephew, one of my brother's youngest. He's coming back to the faith and he's got all kinds of questions. So we meet once a week online. We follow a podcast and we share on that.
that's
So
awesome.
another
So
young man wants to do a bit of mentoring, a more formal mentoring. So there's that, right? Then so
there's a definite hunger in young men, and that's the next question. What advice, especially for our young men, do you have for them to be a heroic man? The call of to be that heroic man that God's calling them to. What advice do you have for them?
to be a heroic man or a man of God, a man after God's ways, right? I would say that's an interesting question because 10 years ago, I might have a slightly different answer. I mean, it's obviously you want to give your life to the Lord. Jesus comes first, right? And let's just assume that's a given, right? Let's just assume
Yeah.
that's a given. I would say on top of that today, is dying to self for the other when it comes in handy, especially in a relationship, when you get engaged, when you get married, right? Put the other person first. Learn how to die to yourself. Imitate Jesus on the cross. This is one teachings we give in marriage preparation. A great conference we got introduced about almost 20 years from that ago by Christopher West, The Theology of the Body by John
Yep.
Paul II. When Christopher West came to Ottawa, again, was Father Sean Wenger who told us about it. We went there and we were blown away. We said, how come we didn't hear about this before? Since then, we've been like Theology of the Body evangelists. We've actually, for a while, we've spoken to crowds, small crowds or somewhat small crowds in Hamilton, Ontario, in Texas, in Newfoundland, here in Ottawa, in Toronto, about all that, and to young people, and the young people grasp that truth. They were thirsty. They still are thirsty, right? So you present them the truth that's not watered down. They don't want to hear watered down stuff.
No,
They want
they
to they
don't want
want to hear.
pablum.
No, they are
They
tired
want
of that.
steak.
They are tired of that. What was that? They
Yep.
want steak.
They want steak. They want something
Exactly.
to chew on.
Steak with a lot of peppercorn and mushrooms and
Oh,
little,
yeah, yeah,
gravy on it, and little twig of parsley, maybe, not too much, right? Don't want to ruin it. And they eat it up. I was shocked because this is a teaching. What I've seen, this is when I was touched. This was happening in Houston. This young man didn't want to be there. His mother paid him the weekend, as a gift. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's 16 years old. Like, but he had a conversion from hearing that message, because we tell them we our goal as men is to die on the cross like Jesus did. We have a picture, and I say to them, us men, this is our calling. That's what we're called to do. And when guys hear that, it reaches them, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I have a purpose. I have a better understanding of my purpose in life. And to see that message of John Paul II, like, so timely, right? God works. Timing of God is always great, right?
yeah.
And the transformation of men around the world through Ministry of Theology of the Body Institute, just amazing. But to have seen that and still do, and so we teach that into marriage prep, because we do give marriage prep one-on-one. We also do
Okay.
it as a group with other couples, but some reason we're on a walk a few years ago, and as we're growing older, I said to Christine, I said, we've been involved in all these different ministries, and things change, and I said, I just pray to God that can still be relevant to Him for others as we grow older. I think it was like a week later, we got calls to speak, and another call for mentoring, and another call for marriage prep, and I said to Christine, I said, that's the last time I make that prayer. Oh
Yes,
God.
yeah,
So
yeah.
back to the young men, die to self and be open to what the Lord's calling you to do. And as young married men, or even as a couple, we encourage them to have yourself a mission, a mission, a one sentence mission, and we work with, like, I will serve the Lord in the ways that He's calling me, like something like that, right? So we articulate it into a sentence that they can grasp even better. So yeah, it's awesome. It's
That
awesome.
is awesome. So, do you have a go-to saint, or a couple of them that are that you walk with?
It's funny. I don't have like a fantastic story, like people say. My middle name is this because I was born on the feast day of that, and there was a miracle in the family, or whatever. I don't have one of those. But to your second point, I have a few, and typical French Canadian, or even Canadian, I guess, Saint Joseph, right?
Yes.
Saint Joseph in, like, Saint Joseph Oratory in Montreal.
Yeah.
You've been there. Like, it's very part of. Well, he's a patron saint of Canada, right? And
Yes.
and
We did the Litany of Saint Joseph to honor him in song with a full orchestra. So
exactly.
that,
With that, and as I kept growing and discovering, as I love my Canadian martyrs, right? And segue to that, more recent is Saint Andre Bessette of Montreal, right, from Saint Joseph Oratory, right? You've been there,
what you're saying is we don't have to go too far to find heroic saints that are right here in Canada, right?
yeah. And Saint Caterina Tataquita, right,
Yep.
both in northern states and in Ontario, and having grown in our faith with Saint John Paul II and Mother Teresa being contemporaries. Oh gosh, what a blessing, right? And so all of them, I guess, they're have been part of my life. Outside of that, it comes and goes, right? It's as I learn of a saint in a particular time, it's like, oh my gosh, did we know that, right? I mean, you got the Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint John Chrysostom, right? And Saint Augustine. But
Yeah, there's no shortage of them. That if you can't find one, you're not looking hard enough.
that's right. And I always pay attention to when there's a Saint Charles saint because my namesake. So Saint
There you
Charles no
go.
longer. I know there's a bunch of them that are martyrs, so you never know.
So there's yeah, that's quite the calling. So I don't know if you know, but the Gaelic term is Ishkabaha, which means water of life. And I pray that you continue to lead many souls to the true water of life. And I want to thank you for having a dram with us today.
John, thank you very much for this ministry and for this occasion. I'm quite blessed and honored to be here. And yes, it's I thank you very much and kind to you as well. Continue the great work you do.
And we'll hopefully, Lord willing, see you this summer on the motorcycles.
Yes, we have it on the calendar. Amen to
There you
that.
go. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of A Dram with Friends. Like and subscribe. Go to all podcast platforms to look for it on podcast, or go to godsquad.ca to support our mission.